Who do you think you are? The waitress's voice sliced through Le Corbeau Noir like a blade. Wine dripped from her chin. A broken glass glittered at her feet. Charlotte Banks, daughter of a United States Senator, fiancée of the most feared Mafia boss in New York, had just screamed at her to kneel, and the waitress had refused. 40 dangerous men stopped breathing. Adrian Vico slowly set down his wine. And Charlotte, a woman who had never in her life been denied a single thing, suddenly could not find a single word, because the waitress was still standing, and she was still waiting for an answer. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from tonight. I truly love seeing how far my stories travel. I said the lamb, Adrian. Charlotte Banks's voice was sweet enough to poison a man. She had been smiling for the last 23 minutes, the kind of smile she wore to charity galas, the kind that had gotten 3 different waiters fired this year alone, and now at exactly 9:14 on a Thursday evening in late October, the smile was beginning to slip. You ordered the duck, Charlotte. I did not. You did. I was sitting right here. Well, I've changed my mind. A woman is allowed to change her mind, Adrian. Or is that somewhere in your precious little book of family rules too? Adrian Vico did not answer her. He rarely answered her. He picked up his wine, he lifted it to his lips, and he watched his fiancée the way a man watches a storm approach a house that isn't his. Adrian was 37. His hair was already beginning to gray at the temples. His father had died with a bullet in his forehead at this very restaurant 8 years ago, in this very booth. And Adrian had inherited everything, the docs, the name, the enemies, and the marriage contract with Senator Harold Banks's only daughter. He had signed the contract on a Tuesday. He had not signed it because he wanted to. He had signed it because his mother had asked him to on her deathbed, and Adrian Vico did not refuse his mother anything, not even a woman he could not stand the sight of. Adrian. Yes, Charlotte. Are you listening to me? I have been listening to you for 4 years. I don't know how to stop. Her mouth tightened. She leaned forward. The diamond on her finger, 4 carats flawless, selected by Adrian's assistant, caught the candlelight. Do you know what my father said to me this morning? No, Charlotte, I don't. He said, darling, Adrian is not a man. Adrian is a mood. Isn't that funny? He said you were a mood. Your father is a very insightful man. You're not even going to defend yourself. Why would I defend myself from the truth? Charlotte set down her fork with a little click. 2 tables away, a man in a dark suit, one of Adrian's, turned his head very slightly, then turned it back. The staff of Le Corbeau Noir had learned over the years to recognize the exact tone of a Charlotte Banks meltdown at 3 distinct stages, the way a farmer recognizes the sound of approaching weather. This was stage 2. Stage 3 was when somebody lost a job. The waitress appeared at the edge of the table, the way all the waitresses at Le Corbeau Noir appeared quietly without intrusion, with her hands folded in front of her. Can I bring you anything else this evening, Miss Banks, Mr. Vico? Her voice was soft, polite. There was no accent Charlotte could place, and that itself was unusual. Charlotte had spent a lifetime placing accents. New money, old money, immigrant, Southern. She could tell you within 3 syllables exactly how much a stranger was worth. This one she could not place. And Charlotte Banks did not like things she could not place. Yes, actually, you can bring me the lamb. I'm so sorry, ma'am. The lamb service closed at 9. The chef has prepared a beautiful... Did I ask you for a speech? No, ma'am. Then don't give me one. Yes, ma'am. Charlotte waited. The waitress, young, perhaps 29, perhaps 30, with green eyes that did not blink the way other people's eyes blinked, did not move. She stood there with her hands folded, waiting to be given permission to exist. Well, Charlotte said, go. I apologize, Ms. Banks. I cannot bring you the lamb. The kitchen has closed that service for the evening. If I may offer, what is your name? Maeve, ma'am. Maeve what? Just Maeve. Charlotte's smile widened. It had teeth now. Just Maeve. How mysterious. Adrian, isn't she mysterious? She has no last name, like a pop star, like a dear. Do you think that's sad, Adrian? Don't you think that's a little bit sad? Adrian did not look up. Eat your duck, Charlotte. It was the dismissal that did it. Charlotte Banks had been her entire life a collector of small private humiliations. Humiliations she had swallowed in front of her mother, her tutors, her father's colleagues, her old boarding school headmistress, who had once told her in front of a room full of girls that she was not as clever as she believed she was. Every one of those humiliations still lived inside her, and every one of them had an interest rate. And tonight, with the wedding 6 weeks away, with her father breathing down her neck about grandchildren, with Adrian looking at her the way a butcher looks at a cut of meat that has gone slightly gray, tonight the interest came due. She turned to the waitress. "You know what, Maeve? I've changed my mind again. I don't want the lamb. I don't want the duck. I want to watch you apologize." "Apologize, ma'am, for being rude to me." "I don't believe I was rude, ma'am." "You are being rude right now." Maeve was silent for a moment. Her eyes flickered just once to Adrian. He had not moved. He was still watching his wine. "I apologize if I came across that way, Ms. Banks. It was not my intent." "On your knees." The entire table stopped. "Ma'am, I said on your knees. You will get down on your knees right here in front of me, in front of my fiancé, in front of this entire restaurant, and you will apologize. Properly. The way a servant apologizes." 3 tables away, an old man with a white mustache, the don of a family from Philadelphia, a man who had buried 4 wives and 2 enemies, set down his knife and fork. He did not look at Charlotte. He looked at Adrian, and he waited. Maeve's hands were still folded in front of her. "I will not, Ms. Banks." "Excuse me. I will not kneel. I am happy to apologize if you believe I've caused offense, but I will not kneel on this floor. You will do exactly what I—" "No, Ms. Banks." The wine glass came out of nowhere. Charlotte did not plan it. Charlotte never planned anything. Charlotte lived her entire life one reaction ahead of her own mind and one reaction behind her own mouth. And now her hand had already closed around the stem of the glass and her arm was already swinging and the glass was already in the air before the conscious part of her brain had caught up with the fact that she had in front of 40 witnesses decided to throw a piece of crystal at a woman's face. It caught Maeve on the cheekbone. It shattered against the marble floor. Red Bordeaux bloomed down Maeve's white blouse like a wound. She did not flinch. She did not gasp. She did not raise a hand to her face. She stood there with the wine running down her chin, and she looked at Charlotte Banks with an expression so perfectly, arrestingly calm that 3 different men in the restaurant, men who had killed other men with their own hands, felt something cold walk up the back of their necks. Because Maeve's face in that moment was not the face of a waitress. It was a face they had seen before, a long time ago, in photographs they were not supposed to have looked at. And one of them, a man at the bar whose name was Luca Moretti, reached very slowly into his jacket pocket and turned off his phone. "Now," Charlotte said. Her voice was shaking. Her own wrist was trembling from the force of the throw. "Now you kneel." "No, Miss Banks. Kneel or I swear to God I will make sure you—" "Who do you think you are?" The words landed in the air like a bell. Charlotte stopped. "What?" "I asked a question, Mrs. Banks. Who do you think you are?" I am. Because I have been standing here for the last 4 minutes, and I have been trying very hard to understand what exactly it is you believe about yourself. I've been trying to understand what a woman has to be told, from what age, by how many people, and what tone of voice to grow up believing that another woman is going to kneel on a restaurant floor because she threw a glass of wine at her face. And I can't work it out. So I thought I'd just ask you directly. I am Charlotte Banks. Yes, I know your name. I am going to be Mrs. Vico in 6 weeks. Yes, I know that too. My father is senator. I know who your father is, Ms. Banks. I know exactly who your father is. That is not the question I asked you. Charlotte's mouth opened. It stayed open. For the first time in her adult life, and Charlotte would for months afterward remember this moment with a clarity that would keep her awake at 3 in the morning, she could not find a single word inside her head. There was nothing there. Just a white shrieking silence and the realization arriving far too late that she had done something she could not take back in a room full of men whose names she did not know. And across the table, Adrian Vico, who had not moved, who had not spoken, who had not lifted his eyes from his wine glass since the moment the wine had hit Maeve's blouse, finally looked up. He looked at the waitress, and the corner of his mouth so slightly, so briefly, that only the old Don from Philadelphia caught it lifted. "Adrian," Charlotte whispered. "Yes, Charlotte." "Adrian, tell her to get away from me. Tell her she's fired." "She doesn't work for me, Charlotte." She works for this restaurant, and this restaurant works for you. That is not how any of this works. Adrian. Yes, Charlotte. Why are you not defending me? He took a long, slow sip of his wine. He set the glass down. He folded his hands on the white linen tablecloth. Because Charlotte, in the last 4 minutes, you have done something that if you were a man, would have required me to kill you before you left this restaurant. You assaulted a server under my protection in a house governed by an older law than the one you grew up learning about in your father's very expensive schools. And I am trying at this moment to decide whether the fact that you are my fiancé is going to save you or condemn you. Charlotte's face went white. Adrian, you don't mean that. You can't mean that. Over a waitress, over a woman. What is the difference? That Charlotte is exactly the problem. Maeve. Adrian spoke her name quietly. Yes, Mr. Vico. Come here, please. Maeve took 2 steps forward. The wine was still dripping from the hem of her blouse. She stood at the edge of the table. She did not look at Charlotte. She looked at Adrian. Maeve, what you just said to Ms. Banks about the old rules, about hospitality, about what is owed to a servant in the house of a made man. Where did you learn those words? My grandfather, Mr. Vico. Your grandfather? Yes, sir. Was he Italian? No, sir. Sicilian? No, sir. What was he, Maeve? A pause. A long one for him. The entire restaurant had fallen so quiet that a man 3 tables away could be heard swallowing a sip of water. He was your father's friend, Mr. Vico. The wine glass in Adrian Vico's hand cracked. It did not shatter. A single thin fissure ran up the bowl of it, and a bead of Bordeaux rolled down the side of the glass onto his knuckle. He did not notice. His eyes had not left Maeve's face. My father, he said very quietly, did not have friends. He had one Mr. Vico. What was his name? Not here, sir. What was his name, Maeve? She leaned down. She bent at the waist. She put her lips very close to Adrian Vico's ear. And she said one word, one name, and Adrian Vico, a man whose face had been trained since the age of 12 not to show a single thing it did not choose to show, closed his eyes. He sat like that for perhaps 4 seconds. When he opened them again, something in the architecture of his face had changed. Not much, nothing a stranger would have noticed. But Luca Moretti at the bar, who had known Adrian Vico since they were both 15 years old, saw it clearly, and Luca Moretti quietly signaled to 2 other men at 2 other tables, and those 2 men quietly rose to their feet, and Charlotte Banks, who understood none of it, who could read none of it, who had lived her entire life inside a language whose grammar she had never bothered to learn, saw only that something had happened and that the something was not going to be good for her. Adrian, she whispered. Adrian, what did she just say to you? He did not answer. Adrian, please, please. Whatever she said, she's lying. She's a waitress. She's some nobody with a story. Please. Charlotte. Yes. Be quiet. She was quiet. Sure. Mr. Kellen. The manager appeared at Adrian's elbow within 3 seconds. Mr. Kellen was 61 years old. He had worked at Le Cordon Noir for 34 of those years. He had never once in all that time been summoned to a table and found his employer's face looking the way it looked right now. Yes, Mr. Vico. Maeve is going home. With pay. Tonight and tomorrow and every night until further notice. Yes, Mr. Vico. You will drive her yourself. Not a taxi, not a car service. You. Yes, Mr. Vico. And Mr. Kellen. Yes, Mr. Vico. Ms. Banks is no longer welcome in this restaurant at any time, for any reason. If she presents herself at the door, you will not open it. The entire restaurant heard him. Charlotte Banks made a small, strangled sound in the back of her throat. Adrian, you cannot, the wedding, my father, Adrian, look at me. Adrian, look at me. He did not look at her. He was looking at Maeve, and Maeve, with wine drying on her blouse and a red welt rising on her cheekbone, was looking back at him with an expression that was not quite fear and not quite triumph, but something harder to name. The expression of a woman who has, after a very long time, said a thing she had promised herself she would never say, and who is now waiting with great patience to see what it cost her. Adrian, please. Charlotte's voice had cracked. She was not a woman who cried in public, but she was very close to it now, and the thought of crying in front of the waitress, The waitress was worse somehow than any of the rest of it. My father will hear about this. He will hear about every word of it. By midnight. I hope he does, Charlotte. You what? I hope your father hears about every word of this. By midnight. I have been waiting to have a conversation with your father for a very long time, and I think tonight is an excellent night to have it. Adrian, what are you? Go home, Charlotte. Adrian. Go home. She went. She did not go quietly, but she went. And when she was gone, when the door had closed behind her, when the men in the dark suits had returned to their tables, when the hum of civilized conversation had slowly begun to return to Le Corbeau Noir, like water returning to a glass, Adrian Vico remained at his booth alone with a cracked wine glass in front of him and a single bead of red Bordeaux drying on his knuckle. He did not move for a long time, and then very slowly he lifted his eyes. The name Maeve had whispered in his ear was a name he had not spoken aloud in 19 years. It was the name of a man who officially had never existed. A man whose file had been burned in 2006 in a furnace in New Jersey by Adrian's father's own hand. A man whose wife and daughter had been placed under protection into a life so quiet and so carefully invisible that even Adrian, who had inherited the ledgers, the contacts, the debts, and the long list of people his father had loved and feared, had been told on his father's deathbed that the family was gone, that they had died in a fire in Boston, that there was nothing left. His father had lied to him. His father had lied to him on his deathbed about the only man he had ever called a friend. And now, 19 years later, the granddaughter of that man was standing in the back hallway of Le Corbeau Noir with wine on her blouse and a 61-year-old manager driving her home. And Adrian Vico understood with the cold, settling clarity of a man watching a very long chess game finally reveal its opening move that his entire evening, his entire engagement, his entire inheritance had just been rearranged by a single word whispered at a dinner table by a waitress who did not have a last name. He picked up the cracked wine glass. He looked at it for a long moment, and then without a sound, without a flicker of expression, without a single word to the empty chair across from him, Adrian Vico smiled. Adrian did not go home that night. He sat in that booth for another 40 minutes after Charlotte left, and the staff moved around him the way water moves around a stone quietly, carefully, without touching. Nobody offered him a new wine glass. Nobody cleared the broken one. Luca Moretti stayed at the bar nursing the same drink he had poured an hour ago, watching his boss in the mirror behind the bottles with the kind of attention a man gives to something that is about to either detonate or go silent forever. And he had spent enough years next to Adrian Vico to know that the two things looked exactly alike from the outside. At 10:47, Adrian stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He left $600 on the table in cash. He always paid in cash. Always left $600. Always on Thursday nights, a ritual so consistent that the Thursday waitstaff had come to think of it as a kind of salary. Then he walked to the back of the restaurant, past the kitchen, past the supply closet, past the door that led to the alley, where the delivery trucks came on Tuesdays, and he stopped in front of Mr. Kellen's office. He knocked once. "Come in." Mr. Kellen was sitting behind his desk with the glass of water and a look on his face that a man gets when he has spent the last hour inside a thought he cannot finish. "Did you take her home?" Adrian asked. "Yes, Mr. Vico." "Where does she live?" Kellen hesitated. It was a small hesitation, the kind a man makes when he is deciding whether the answer to a question is his to give. "Adrian," he said, and the use of the first name told Adrian everything, because Kellen had not called him Adrian since he was 19 years old. "How much do you know?" "Not enough. That's why I'm asking." "She lives in Greenpoint, small building on Meserole, 3rd floor. He paused. "She took the bus the first 3 months she worked here. Wouldn't let me call a car. I only found out her address because I drove her myself one night last February when it was 17 degrees outside and she was still going to take the bus." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "How long has she been here?" 11 months. "And before that?" "She said she was a sous chef in Boston. I didn't check. Her references were—" Kellen stopped himself, set down his water glass. "Her references were perfect, Adrian. Too perfect. I've been doing this for 34 years. References that perfect don't come from restaurants." "No," Adrian agreed. "They don't. Are you going to tell me what she said to you?" "No." "Are you going to tell me who she is?" Adrian looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, She's the reason my father kept a locked drawer in his desk for 30 years, and I never had the combination. Kellen sat very still. God, he said quietly. Yes. Adrian. Go home, Mr. Kellen, lock up. Don't talk to anyone tonight. What about Charlotte? Senator Banks is going to let him. Kellen looked at him. Son, he said, and this time Adrian did not correct him. What are you going to do? Adrian picked up at his coat from the chair by the door. I'm going to find out, he said, what my father was hiding. He left. Outside, the October air hit him like a hand against the chest. Old, sudden reel. Luca was waiting by the car. He had his collar up and his hands in his pockets, and the look on his face that said he already knew most of what had happened inside and was waiting for the rest of it. She's in Greenpoint, Adrian said, getting into the back seat. I know. You know. I had Marco follow the car. You were in there for 40 minutes, boss. 40 minutes alone. I wasn't going to sit on my hands. Adrian leaned back against the seat. He closed his eyes for exactly 4 seconds, which was the amount of time Adrian Vico allowed himself to feel anything he hadn't scheduled. Then he opened them. Tell me what you know about the name Cassian Voss. The car went quiet. Luca's hands shifted on the wheel. He didn't answer for a moment, and in the silence between the question and the answer, the sound of Manhattan at 11 o'clock filled the car horns and sirens, in the low, constant percussion of a city that never fully slept. Cassian Voss, Luca said finally, has been dead since 2004. No, he hasn't. Another silence. Adrian. He's been dead on paper since 2004. My father burned the file in 2006. I found the furnace records when I inherited the Jersey warehouse. I just didn't know whose file it was. He paused. Until tonight. Luca exhaled. It was not a small exhale. What did she say to you exactly, Wupomopin? She said his name. Just the name. Just the name, and the way she said it, Luca, the way she said it, she knew exactly what it would do. She wasn't surprised when I reacted. She was waiting for me to react. She has been waiting for a very long time, I think. Luca was quiet. The traffic light ahead turned red. He stopped. He did not look in the rearview mirror. Boss, if Cassian Voss is alive, and if that girl is his granddaughter, then that means your father didn't just lie to you about one man. He lied to you about a whole family. He paused. And there's a reason a man like your father protects a family that hard. I know. There's a debt. I know, Luca. A big one. I know. Adrian's voice was flat, impatient, and final. That's what I intend to find out. The light turned green. Luca drove. Maeve at that precise moment was sitting on the edge of her bathtub in her apartment on Meserole Street with a wet cloth pressed to her cheekbone and her phone in her other hand staring at a number she had not dialed in 2 years. The welt had gone down a little. The wine had come out of her blouse in the sink mostly. The part that hadn't would have to be thrown away. And she found sitting in her bathroom at 10 past 11 on a Thursday night that the thing she could not stop thinking about was not the wine glass or the kneeling or the 40 watching men or the name she had whispered into the ear of the most dangerous man in New York. The thing she could not stop thinking about was Adrian Vico's hand on the wine glass, the crack she had heard, the way he had closed his eyes for exactly 4 seconds after she had spoken. She had studied him for 11 months. She had served him coffee and wine and once a very late-night plate of pasta that he had not ordered and had not asked anyone to explain. She had watched him speak to his men and not speak to his fiancée, and sit alone in a booth at the end of the evening with the particular quietness of a man who has been alone inside himself for a very long time. She had prepared very carefully for every possible version of how this evening might go. She had not prepared for him to look at her the way he had looked at her after she said the name. She had not prepared for that. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it before the second vibration. Hello, Maeve. It was not a voice she recognized. It was a man's voice, older, slightly accented in a way she could not immediately place. Who is this? She said. A friend of your grandfather's. She stood up. She moved to the window and looked down at the street below. Nothing unusual. A cab, a man walking a dog, the orange puddle of a streetlight. I don't know what you... Don't. Please, we don't have time, and I think you know we don't have time. My name is not important. What is important is that you said the name tonight, and now a great many people who were very comfortable with a certain arrangement are going to become very uncomfortable very quickly, And some of those people are dangerous in ways that Adrian Vico cannot protect you from even if he wanted to. Maeve said nothing. She was very still. Did he hear you? The man asked. Yes. And his face, yes, he heard me. Good, the man exhaled. Then we are already past the point of no return, which means you need to do exactly what I'm going to tell you, and you need to do it tonight. I'm not going to take instructions from a man who won't tell me his name. A short pause, then quietly, your grandfather called me Felix. He called me Felix because he could never pronounce my real name correctly even after 30 years. He used to say, Felix, if you ever find my granddaughter in trouble, you get her out of it. And Maeve, I have been looking for you for 2 years, and you spent 11 months working in a restaurant, and I still nearly missed you. So please, let's not waste what's left of tonight. She sat back down on the edge of the bathtub. What do I need to do? She said. Nothing tonight. Tonight you sleep. Tomorrow morning, very early before 7, you leave your apartment and you go to the address I'm going to send you. You don't tell anyone. Not the manager, not anyone from the restaurant, not anyone. And Adrian Vico. Another pause, longer this time. Adrian Vico, Felix said carefully, is not your enemy, but he is not yet your ally. There is a difference, and the space between the two is the most dangerous enough place on earth for a woman in your position. Do you understand? Yes. Good. The address is coming now. Memorize it. Delete the message. The call ended. Maeve looked at her phone. The address appeared. She read it twice, 3 times, 4 times until she was certain she had it, and then she deleted the message. She sat for a moment in the quiet of her bathroom. Then she said very softly to nobody in particular, Grandpa, what did you get me into? The address gave no answer. Neither did the empty apartment. Neither did the phone when it buzzed again 40 seconds later with a different unknown number. This one sending no message, making no call, simply existing on her screen for 6 seconds before it disappeared. Maeve stared at the blank screen. Somebody else knew she was here. Somebody who was not Felix. She turned off the bathroom light. At 11:53, Adrian Vico sat in the back of his car outside a building in Greenpoint, a building with a single lit window on the 3rd floor, and he did not get out. Luca had not asked him why they were here. Luca would not ask. That was the thing about Luca. He had a gift for the silence of waiting, the silence that understood its own function. She's careful, Adrian said mostly to himself. She's been here for 11 months, and she's been careful about everything. The way she moves, the way she positioned herself in that dining room. She always took the section closest to the fire exit. I noticed that in February, Luca said. I thought she was just nervous. She's not nervous. No, a pause. Boss, what was he to your father, Voss? Adrian looked at the window for a long moment. The light was still on. My father had a rule, he said finally. No friends. It wasn't sentiment, he said it was arithmetic. He said the more people you love, the more places you can be hurt from. He said a man in our business should keep his heart as small as possible. He paused. Cassian Voss was the one exception. I never knew his name. I only knew there was an exception because I found the locked drawer. What was in the drawer? I don't know. I never had the combination. He looked at Luca. I found the drawer on the day my father died. His hands were too weak to open it himself. He tried to, his hands were shaking, and I offered to break it open for him, and he looked at me and he said, some things are not yours to know yet, Adrian. When the time comes, the door will open by itself. Luca said nothing. He died 2 hours later, Adrian said. The drawer is still locked. I never found the combination. For 8 years, I told myself the drawer was empty, that it was a habit, that my father kept a locked drawer because men like my father always keep locked drawers. He looked back up at the window. The light went out. It wasn't empty. No, Luca agreed. It wasn't. She's the combination, Luca. I know. She came here on purpose, 11 months in that restaurant, in that section, serving that table. She was waiting for the right moment. She planned this. Everything tonight, the wine, the confrontation, the name she chose tonight, deliberately. Why tonight? It was a good question. Adrian had been turning it over since the car had pulled away from Le Corbeau Noir. Why tonight? Why after 11 months of patience, 11 months of silence, 11 months of carrying a name, that could detonate half a dozen very carefully constructed lives. Why had she chosen a Thursday in October, 6 weeks before a wedding, to say it? He thought about Charlotte, about the glass, about the wine running down Maeve's blouse, and the way Maeve had stood there with the wine on her and had not moved. Because she didn't plan it, he said slowly. She planned everything except that. She was going to wait maybe another month, maybe longer. And then Charlotte threw the glass. And she reacted. She reacted, and once the name was out, she couldn't have held it back. He shook his head. Charlotte may have just accelerated something that was going to happen anyway. She just didn't know it. Charlotte accelerates a lot of things, Luca said. Charlotte accelerates everything. That's always been her greatest gift and her worst quality. He reached for the door handle, then stopped. The wedding is off, he said. It was not a question. It was not even a decision. It was the announcement of something that had been true for a very long time, perhaps since the Tuesday he had signed the contract with his mother's hand in his, and had felt even then the particular emptiness of a man who has made a promise with his pen and not his heart. Senator Banks is going to be very unhappy, Luca said. Senator Banks, Adrian replied, is going to have much larger things to be unhappy about very soon. I think he knows that. I think that's why he arranged the wedding in the first place. He let go of the door handle. He settled back into the seat. Go back to the office, he said. I want everything on Cassian Voss. Every piece of paper, every record, every name connected to him before 2004. I want the tax records from the Jersey warehouse for 2005 and 2006. I want the furnace records. And I want the name of the man who told my father in whatever year it was that the family had died in a fire in Boston. Luca put the car in drive. And the girl, he asked, let her sleep. And tomorrow, Adrian looked at the dark window on the third floor one last time as the car pulled away from the curb. Tomorrow, he said, she's going to find out that the thing she came here to do is much more complicated than she thought. And I'd like to be the one to tell her. Maeve upstairs in the dark heard a car pull away from the street below. She stood at the window, not visible, just listening. Her hand was against the wall. Her breathing was very even. She had heard 2 cars tonight. The first one had arrived at 11:53, had sat for 22 minutes and had just left. The second had come at 12:09 and had not left. It was still there. She could see the shape of it just outside the reach of the streetlight, parked against the curb with its engine off. 2 different cars, 2 different watchers. She thought about Felix and his careful voice and his warning that there were people who were dangerous in ways Adrian Vico could not protect her from. She thought about her grandfather sitting across from her at the kitchen table when she was 11 years old saying, Maeve, the most important thing a person can learn is the difference between a man who watches you because he wants to hurt you and a man who watches you because he wants to protect you. The posture is almost the same, but the stillness is different. A man who wants to hurt you is restless. He can't help it. A man who wants to protect you, he's very, very still. The car outside the streetlight was still. She let go of the wall. She went to the kitchen and filled a glass with water. She drank it standing up in the dark because she was not afraid and she was not brave. She was simply operating as she had been operating for a long time on the engine of her grandfather's instructions and the fuel of her own cold, clear, well-trained patience. The drawer Adrian Vico had never been able to open was sitting in an office 8 blocks from where she stood. She knew the combination. She had known it since she was 14 years old. She just wasn't sure yet whether Adrian Vico had earned the right to open it. Tomorrow, she decided, would answer that question. She set down the glass. In a car outside in the street below, one of Adrian's men sat with a thermos of coffee and a phone he was not allowed to use and the instruction delivered by Luca in 30 seconds before they parted to watch the building until 6 in the morning and let nobody in. At 12:37, his phone vibrated. Not a call, a text, from a number he did not recognize containing 4 words. She already knows you're there. He stared at the message for a long moment. He looked up at the dark window on the 3rd floor. He called Luca. Luca called Adrian at 12:41. Adrian was still awake. He had not even attempted sleep. He was sitting at the desk in his home office with 8 years of his father's financial records spread across the surface, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold 40 minutes ago. And when Luca's name appeared on his phone screen, he picked it up before the first ring finished. Talk. Marco got a text, Luca said, from an unknown number. 4 words, she already knows you're there. Adrian was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. She sent it herself. We don't know. The number was already dead by the time Marco tried to call back. Could be her. Could be someone watching her building independently. A pause. Boss, if someone else is watching her building, then we have a problem. Yeah. How many men does Marco have with him? Just himself. You said to keep it quiet. Send 2 more, unmarked car. Tell them to park on the other side of the building. Nobody goes in, nobody comes out until I say so. And Marco tells nobody about the text except you and me, not even the other 2. Done. And the text itself, screenshot it and delete it from Marco's phone, then destroy the screenshot. He ended the call. He sat for a moment with his phone in his hand, and then he set it on the desk and looked at the records in front of him. He had found in the last hour exactly 3 references to anything resembling the name Cassian Voss, and all 3 had been redacted. Not crossed out, not whited over, but physically cut from the page, with something sharp leaving rectangular holes in the paper that had been there so long the edges had gone soft. His father had done this himself, he was certain. His father had gone through 30 years of records with a blade and removed every trace of one man's name, and had done it so thoroughly that Adrian had spent 8 years looking at those records without once noticing the absences. You only see the holes when you know what was supposed to fill them. He picked up his coffee, remembered it was cold, set it back down. His father had loved one person in the world unconditionally and without reservation, and that person was Adrian. He had said so plainly, without sentiment, in the way that men of that generation said important things once directly in a moment you weren't expecting, so that you carried it for the rest of your life. He had said, Adrian, you are the only good thing I made. He had said it on the night Adrian was 18 and had come home with his hands covered in someone else's blood for the first time, and his father had sat across from him at this same desk and had not flinched and had not looked away and had said those words, and Adrian had understood that it was not a comfort. It was a warning. It was his father saying, do not become what I am entirely because I am not entirely good. But he had still kept a locked drawer. He had still looked his dying son in the eyes and lied about a fire in Boston. And somewhere in Greenpoint, in a dark apartment, on the 3rd floor of a building, now surrounded by 4 of Adrian's men, the woman who held the combination was either sleeping or standing at her window calculating her next move. He was beginning to suspect it was the second one. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he had not dialed in 3 years. It rang 4 times, then a woman's voice thick with interrupted sleep. Adrian, it's past midnight. I know, Aunt Rosa. I'm sorry. A long pause. Rosa Vico was 68 years old and had outlived 2 husbands and a brother, and the better part of a generation of men who had moved in the same circles, and she had done it by being the sharpest person in any room she entered while giving the impression of being the most harmless. She had retired from anything official 8 years ago when Adrian's father died, and now she lived in a brownstone in Carroll Gardens and grew tomatoes and went to Mass on Sundays and pretended very convincingly to know nothing about anything. What happened? She said. I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me honestly. I always answer honestly. Rosa. When it matters, she amended. What do you need, Adrian Cassian Voss? The silence on the other end of the line was the longest silence Adrian had heard from his aunt in his entire life. Rosa Vico did not do long silences. She filled silences the way she filled rooms completely efficiently, without waste. The fact that this silence stretched past 3 seconds, past 5 past 8, told Adrian everything and nothing at once. Rosa. Where did you hear that name? She said finally. Her voice was very careful. Does it matter? Yes. A woman said it to me tonight, at the restaurant. Another silence, shorter this time. A woman, Rosa repeated. What did she look like? Green eyes, dark hair, approximately 30 years old. She said her grandfather, stop. Rosa's voice was sharp, not loud. Rosa never raised her voice, but sharp enough to cut. Don't say it on the phone. Rosa, I need to know. You need to come here tomorrow, early, before anyone else is moving. She paused. And Adrian, do not bring Luca. Luca is, I know who Luca is. Don't bring him. Another pause. This is older than Luca. This is older than you. This is come tomorrow, and I will tell you what your father should have told you 8 years ago. Her voice shifted slightly, and in the shift, Adrian heard something he had not heard from Rosa Vico in a very long time. something that was almost fear. Adrian, this woman, is she safe? She has 4 men watching her building. That's not what I asked. He looked at the records on his desk, at the rectangular holes where a name had been. She knows things, Rosa. She knows things she shouldn't know unless she was raised to know them, Rosa said quietly. Yes, I know. A breath. She's safe as long as she stays in the building tonight. Tomorrow things will be different, and I don't know yet in which direction. She paused one last time. Your father loved that man, Adrian. More than he loved anyone outside this family. Maybe more than some people inside it. What he did, what he chose, it cost him. More than you ever saw, more than he ever said. She hung up. Adrian put the phone on the desk. He looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee, drank it cold, and went back to the records. Maeve woke at 5:14, which was 46 minutes before her alarm, which was unusual because Maeve slept the way she did everything else, with discipline and intention, setting her body to a specific hour and trusting it to deliver. She lay still for a moment, reading the quality of the silence in the apartment, sorting it the way her grandfather had taught her to sort silences, the ones that were empty and the ones that contained something waiting. This one contained something waiting. She got up without turning on the light. She dressed in the dark jeans, dark sweater, flat shoes she could run in. She filled a small bag with the things she would need. Cash, a secondary phone she had bought at a bodega in Sunset Park 8 months ago and charged once a month and otherwise kept. Turned off a key that had no lock she currently had access to, but which she had carried since she was 14, and a folded piece of paper she had not looked at in 2 years, but which she had also carried since she was 14. She checked the street from the window. 3 cars she recognized from last night, Marco's and the 2 that had arrived after midnight. A 4th she did not recognize, parked around the corner, just visible at the edge of her angle of sight. 4 cars. He had added 2 overnight. She was not surprised by this either. She went to the kitchen. She made coffee, 1 cup strong, and she stood at the counter and drank it and thought about Felix and the address he had sent her and the question she had been turning over since 12:30 in the morning, which was not whether to go, but in what order to do things. Whether the address came first or Adrian Vico came first. Felix had said he was not yet her ally. Her grandfather had taught her something different. He had said she was 11, 12 years old. They were sitting on the fire escape in the apartment they'd had in Providence, eating cereal from bowls and watching the pigeons. He had said, Maeve, the most important decision you will ever make in a dangerous situation is the decision about who to trust first, not who is the safest choice, not who seems the kindest. Who to trust first. Because whoever you go to first, you are telling them something about how you see the board. And once you've told someone that, you cannot untell them. He had also said, the Vico family owes us something that cannot be paid in money. He had never told her what it was. She put down her coffee cup. She made a decision. She picked up her regular phone and typed a message to a number she had memorized but never stored. I need to speak with him today. Not the manager, him. She sent it. 17 seconds later, 17 seconds which told her someone had been waiting with a phone in their hand, which told her she had guessed correctly about who was in those cars. The response came. Where? She thought for a moment. The coffee shop on Huron, 8 o'clock. A pause. Longer this time, 28 seconds. He'll be there. She picked up her bag. She went to the door and then she stopped and she turned back and she went to the kitchen drawer, the second one down, the one that stuck in wet weather, and she reached to the very back of it and she pulled out a small envelope that was old enough that the paper had gone soft at the corners. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, printed on the kind of paper they didn't make anymore, of 2 men in their 30s standing in front of a car, squinting into the sun, both of them laughing about something that had happened a half-second before the shutter opened. She knew one of the men. The other man she had never seen a photograph of, but she had no doubt at all who he was, because the set of his shoulders and the angle of his jaw were things she had seen recently every Thursday evening from across a dining room. On the back of the photograph, in her grandfather's handwriting, New Jersey, August 1987. The last good summer. She put the photograph back in the envelope. She put the envelope in her bag. She left the apartment. She did not take the front stairs. She went up 1 floor through the roof access door, across 2 rooftops down the fire escape of the adjacent building, and out through the alley that led onto the cross street. a route she had mapped on her third day in the apartment because Maeve always mapped the exits before she unpacked the boxes. The four cars were still in position when she walked past the end of the block from the cross street and did not look back. Adrian arrived at the coffee shop on Huron at 7:52. He was alone. He had told Luca he was going to his aunt's in Carroll Gardens, which was technically true. He had been there at 6:15 and left at 7:30, and what Rosa had told him in those 75 minutes was sitting inside him now, like a stone swallowed whole, heavy and indigestible, and impossible to ignore. He had driven himself here, which he almost never did. The car was plain one of three unregistered vehicles he kept for occasions when he needed to be, as much as a man like him could be, invisible. He got a coffee and sat at the table in the back corner, and he waited. She came through the front door at exactly 8 o'clock. She had not slept in the clothes she was wearing, which meant she had packed a bag, which meant she had planned to leave this morning regardless of whether he agreed to meet her. That told him something. She saw him immediately, which meant she had already identified every person in the room before she walked through the door, which told him something else. She crossed to the table without hesitation, without the performance of casualness that guilty people produce when they are trying to look comfortable, and she sat down across from him and put her bag on the floor and looked at him with those green eyes that blinked less than most people's eyes. The welt on her cheekbone had faded overnight but not disappeared. He had thought he was prepared to see it in daylight. He found he was not entirely. "You moved fast," he said. "I've been awake since 5. I know, my man on the fire escape saw you leave." She did not look surprised. "The fire escape," she said. "I didn't check the adjacent building." "You checked the rooftops." "I crossed 2 of them." "Aha." He studied her. She studied him back. The coffee shop moved around them, an espresso machine a couple near the window, a man with a laptop and headphones who was paying attention to nothing except his screen. "You have a photograph," he said, her chin lifted very slightly. "How do you know that?" "Because my aunt told me this morning that your grandfather had one. One photograph from New Jersey, August 1987, taken by a woman named Elena who died in 1991. She said it was the only photograph that existed of the 2 of them together, and that your grandfather kept it, and that it had been in your family ever since." He paused. "She said if you had it with you, it meant you were ready to make an offer. And if you didn't have it with you, it meant you were still deciding." Maeve was quiet for a long moment. "Your aunt knows a great deal," she said. "She knew everything. She always knew everything. She just decided this morning that the time for keeping it was over." "What did she tell you?" He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "She told me that your grandfather, Cassian Voss, spent 22 years working alongside my father, not for him, alongside him, as a partner. Equal shares, equal say, equal risk. She told me that in 2003, your grandfather discovered something, a document, a file, something he wasn't supposed to find, and that whatever was in it was significant enough that certain people connected to Senator Harold Banks's family decided that Cassian Voss needed to disappear." He held her gaze. "She told me that my father helped him disappear, that he arranged the new identity, the new life, the story about the fair in Boston, that he kept the secret for the rest of his life." A pause. "And that Cassian Voss, before he agreed to go, made my father promise him one thing." Maeve's hands, which had been very still on the table, moved slightly. She laced her fingers together. "What was the promise?" she said. Her voice was controlled, but not perfectly, not the way it had been controlled last night in the restaurant. "That if the document ever resurfaced, if the thing your grandfather found ever came back into play, the Vico family would stand with the Voss family. Not help from a distance, not money and a plane ticket. Stand with, side by side, whatever the cost." The coffee shop hummed around them. "Your father is dead," Maeve said. "Yes. The promise transfers to you. That is the general principle, yes. Do you honor it?" He looked at her. He looked at her the way he had looked at very few people in his life, the way a man looks at something that is going to alter the shape of everything that comes after. "I don't know yet what I'm honoring," he said honestly. "I don't know what the document is. I don't know what your grandfather found. I don't know what Senator Banks is trying to protect, although I have some theories that are keeping me awake at night." He put his coffee cup down. "But I know that my father made a promise to your grandfather, and I know my father was not a man who made promises he didn't mean. And I know that you walked into my restaurant 11 months ago and took a job as a waitress and waited, which is not a thing a person does without a very serious reason. He paused. So tell me the reason, Maeve. Tell me what your grandfather found. Tell me what Senator Banks is so afraid of that he arranged a marriage between his daughter and me to keep me pointed in the wrong direction. The color changed in her face, not much, but enough. The marriage, she said slowly, the contract. You think Banks arranged it deliberately? I think Harold Banks has known for 20 years that your grandfather is alive. I think he has been looking for him or for whatever he had for 20 years. And I think putting Charlotte in my house was the most elegant way he could imagine to keep me from ever becoming curious about the right things. Maeve's jaw tightened. He knew, she said. Not a question, not to Adrian, to herself, working something out. He knew my grandfather was under your father's protection. He knew the document was connected to the Vico family. So she stopped. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes went somewhere else for a moment, somewhere Adrian couldn't follow. Then they came back. He didn't just arrange the marriage. He used the marriage to watch you, to watch whether you ever found anything, whether your father had left anything behind. Yes. And in 6 weeks, you were going to marry her. Yes. And you had no idea. No, I did not. His voice was level. I had no idea about any of this until a waitress whispered a dead man's name in my ear last night. She reached into her bag. She took out the envelope. She put it on the table between them, and she did not open it. My grandfather is not dead, she said. He is 81 years old, and he lives in a place I will not tell you yet, and he is the only person alive who has seen the original document. He memorized it, all 12 pages. He can recite it word for word. She looked at the envelope. He sent me here. 2 years ago, he told me what to do and where to go, and how long to wait, and what to say and to whom, and I have done every single thing he told me to do, and I have been patient. And last night was not the way it was supposed to happen, but it happened, and now we are here. She looked up. The question is whether you are your father's son. I've been told I am. Your father would have opened that envelope already. He looked at it. He looked at her. He reached across the table, and he picked up the envelope and he opened it. The photograph. 2 men 30s laughing in the New Jersey sun. He turned it over, read the handwriting, put it back on the table. He was quiet for a very long time. He looks happy, Adrian said finally about his father. My grandfather said it was the last summer that felt safe, Maeve replied. He said after that, everything got complicated. And now it is more complicated than either of them could have imagined. She picked up the photograph and put it back in the envelope and put the envelope in her bag. Senator Banks received a phone call this morning at 6:45. I don't know from whom. But 40 minutes later, 2 men I don't recognize drove slowly past my building on Mezzarolu and then parked 2 blocks away and have not moved since. Adrian went very still. You're sure? Felix told me. Who is Felix? An old friend of my grandfather's. He's been watching my back since I arrived in New York. She paused. He was also watching the building on Mezzarol last night. He's the one who texted your man Marco. Adrian stared at her. Felix sent that text. He wanted to see how fast you'd react. He said the speed of a man's reaction tells you everything about whether his protection is real or decorative. And he said you called Luca in under 3 minutes and had 2 more men on the building in under 20. The faintest trace of something that was not quite a smile but was close to one crossed her face. He said your father would have done it in 4. For the first time since Thursday night, Adrian Vico laughed. It was short and it was quiet and it surprised him. Then it stopped because his phone vibrated on the table and he looked at the screen and the name on it was Charlotte, which was not surprising, and the message beneath the name was 4 words that turned the coffee shop cold. Dad knows where she is. Adrian read the message twice. Then he turned the phone face down on the table. We need to move, he said. Now. Maeve did not ask why. She picked up her bag, she stood up, and she was already at the door before Adrian had pushed back his chair. That was the thing he was learning about her. She did not require explanation before action. She processed fast, she moved faster, and she wasted nothing in between. It was a quality he recognized because it was one he had trained into himself over 20 years. And the fact that she had it naturally or had been raised to it told him more about Cassie and Voss than anything Rosa had said that morning. He pulled her left on the sidewalk away from the direction of her building toward the plane car he had parked half a block east. Charlotte texted me, he said as they walked. I gathered. What did she say? Her father knows where you are. Maeve absorbed this without breaking stride. How long ago did she send it? 4 minutes. Then he's known for at least 20 minutes. He wouldn't have told Charlotte until he'd already moved people into position. She glanced sideways at him. Why did she warn you? It was a question Adrian had already been turning over in the 30 seconds since the message arrived, and he did not have a clean answer. Charlotte was not a woman of divided loyalties. She was not subtle, and she was not strategic, and she was in the most fundamental way her father's daughter. Except that her father had last night allowed his daughter to be publicly humiliated and then quietly removed from the most important social arrangement of her life. And Charlotte Banks, whatever else she was, had a memory like a wound. Because she's furious at him, Adrian said. Not at me, at him. She thinks he threw her away. He did throw her away. She just found out which direction. They reached the car. He unlocked it. They got in. He pulled out without signaling and took the first left, then the second right, and then sat at a red light and thought. Felix, he said, can you reach him right now? Yes. Tell him the 2 cars on Messerol are Banks's. Tell him not to approach them and not to let them see him. I need to know if they move. Maeve already had the secondary phone out, the bodega phone, the one he hadn't known existed until this moment, and she was typing. He watched her from his peripheral vision. Her hands were steady, her face was neutral, but her jaw was set in a way that told him she was angry or afraid or both, and that she had decided to be neither of those things until they were somewhere safer, and that the decision was costing her something. Done, she said. Where is your grandfather, Maeve? Not yet. Banks's people are on the street. This is not the moment for... You've known me for less than 12 hours, she said. My grandfather has been hiding for 22 years. He stayed hidden through 2 administrations, 3 FBI investigations that came within a county of him, and a private search that Senator Banks has funded continuously since 2004. I am not telling you his location in a moving car because a man texted 4 words to your ex-fiancée. She looked at him steadily. I trust the principle of your father's promise. I do not yet trust you. Those are different things. He held his own response for a moment. Fair, he said. Yes, it is. He made another turn, then another. He was not going anywhere specific yet. He was moving because a moving target required more resources to track than a stationary one, and because the activity of driving gave his mind the particular rhythm it needed to think clearly. His father had driven the same way, never destination, first route second, always route first, and trust that the destination would clarify. His phone rang. Luca. I know, Adrian said, answering. Marco says 2 of the 4 cars on Messerol are gone. The other 2 are yours. The 2 that are gone are Banks's, I know. How many men? Marco counted 2 in each car, 4 total. And bossed one of the men, the one in the passenger seat of the first car. Marco recognized him. His name is Danny Rourke. He's done private security work for Banks's office for 6 years. Rourke, all right. There's something else. Marco went to check the apartment. The building super let him in. The apartment is clean. She's not there. I know that too, Luca. A pause on Luca's end, a short one. She's with you. Yes. Are you going to tell me where? No, I need you to do something else. The wedding venue, the Caldwell Estate in Westchester. I need you to call them and cancel every booking, every vendor, every arrangement with a full financial settlement on our end. Today, within the hour. Another pause. This one longer. Adrian, canceling the venue means canceling the wedding. Officially, publicly. Once vendors start talking, good, let them talk. Banks will. Banks already moved men to a woman's apartment building at 6 in the morning, Luca. We are past the part where I worry about what Banks will do. His voice was flat. The wedding is done. It was done last night. I am simply making it official. He ended the call. Maeve was watching him. You're using the cancellation, she said. Publicly ending the engagement puts Banks on notice that you already know the marriage was a setup. It also gives Charlotte a reason to keep feeding me information. She's angry enough right now to do it, but anger fades. Humiliation lasts longer. He paused. I'm not proud of that calculation. But you're making it. Yes. Good, she said. I'd rather work with a man who makes hard calculations clearly than one who pretends he doesn't make them at all. He glanced at her. She was looking out the window. The October morning was pale and flat, the kind of light that made everything look like it was waiting for something. My aunt told me something else this morning, he said. She told me what was in the document, what your grandfather found. Maeve's head turned. She knew. She knew the shape of it. Not every detail. Your grandfather never told my father everything because your grandfather was a careful man. But she knew enough. He stopped at another light. She said it was a payment record, a set of financial transfers dated between 1998 and 2002 from a series of shell corporations to a private account. The account belonged to a man who was at the time the chief federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. The light changed. He drove. Banks, Maeve said softly. Not Banks directly. Banks was the conduit. He moved the money through his own network of contributors and bundlers in PAC accounts, the kind of architecture that takes forensic accountants 2 years to unpick. He was paying a sitting federal prosecutor to kill investigations. Specifically, 3 investigations, 2 into labor, racketeering on the New York docks, and 1 into a real estate development company in Queens that was being used to launder construction contract kickbacks. He paused. 2 of those 3 investigations, Maeve, were into Vico family operations. The silence in the car was complete. Your grandfather, Adrian said carefully, was not working alongside my father out of loyalty or friendship alone. Part of his role, the part my father never discussed and Rosa only guessed at, was to interface with Banks, to manage the arrangement. Your grandfather was the one who actually moved the payments. He was the mechanism. And then he found the record, Maeve said. Her voice had gone very quiet. And then he found the full record, not just the Vico payments, all of them. Every prosecutor, every judge, every official Banks had ever purchased, going back to 1991. An entire decade of federal corruption documented in a single file kept by a man who was meticulous enough to believe that the record was his insurance policy. He looked at her. My aunt thinks the prosecutor Banks was paying kept the file himself, as protection. And your grandfather found it because he was in a position that nobody else was in, close enough to both sides to see the whole board. He took it, Maeve said. He copied it. He memorized it. And then he went to my father and told him what he had, and my father understood immediately that Cassian Voss had just become the most dangerous man in New York. Because Banks could not allow that record to surface, not ever, not for any reason. He exhaled. My father hid him. He hid him, and he told Banks the man was dead, and Banks believed him or pretended to believe him, and everyone moved on. Except Banks kept looking. For 22 years. He made a final turn, pulling into a parking structure that was mostly empty at this hour. He cut the engine. And now Banks has a problem because last night in a restaurant full of witnesses, his daughter's engagement was publicly destroyed by a waitress who knows things she shouldn't know. And Banks is smart enough to understand that a waitress who knows things she shouldn't know is not a coincidence. Maeve sat in the sudden stillness of the parked car and said nothing for a long moment. He let her have the silence. He had learned in the last 12 hours that her silences were not empty. They were working silences, computational, and interrupting them cost more than it bought. He doesn't know about the document specifically, she said finally. He knows my grandfather is alive or suspects it. He knows I'm connected somehow. But he doesn't know that I know the full record. He doesn't know my grandfather memorized it. What he knows is enough to move 4 men to your building at 6 in the morning. Yes. She pressed her lips together. How long before this parking structure is compromised? 20 minutes? Maybe 30. Luca knows all my regular locations, but Banks doesn't have Luca's information. Not directly, but Banks has resources I don't fully know the shape of. He's had 22 years to build infrastructure around this particular problem. He turned to face her more directly. Maeve, I need you to make a decision, right now. Not because I'm pressuring you, because the window for certain moves closes in the next few hours, and some of those moves require me to know things that only your grandfather can confirm. She looked at him, really looked at him the way she hadn't quite looked at him in the restaurant, without the performance of the waitress, without the careful, neutral architecture she had built around herself. Just the woman underneath who was tired and angry and had been carrying this for a long time and had last night said the thing she had been saving for years. Ask me, she said. The document. Does your grandfather have physical proof, something beyond his memory? Something that could stand up in a federal investigation? Yes. Where is it? She reached into her bag. She took out the key, the one with no current lock, and held it up between them. A safe deposit box in a bank in Yonkers. The box is registered under a name that is not my grandfather's and not mine. She paused. Inside the box is a USB drive. On the drive is a scanned copy of every page of the original document, including 2 pages that my grandfather removed from the file before he returned it, pages that were specific enough to constitute on their own federal evidence of bribery of a judicial officer. She closed her hand around the key. He kept the physical pages in the box as well, sealed in an archival envelope. The paper is old enough to be authenticated. The ink is old enough to be dated. Adrian looked at the key, and the box has been sitting in Yonkers for how long? 14 years. My grandfather opened it when I was 15. He put me on the access list when I was 16. She looked at the key in her hand. He said, Maeve, this is the only thing in the world that can either save us or destroy us, depending on who gets to it first. Don't go near it until you have a Vico standing next to you. The air in the car changed. He told you to wait for a Vico. He told me to wait for the right Vico. He said there would be a moment he didn't know when, he didn't know what it would look like when the situation would force the issue, when I would know. She looked up from the key. Last night, when Charlotte threw the glass, when I said the name and you closed your eyes, she paused. That was the moment. He said nothing. Are you the right Vico, Adrian? He sat with the question. He did not rush it. He gave it the weight it deserved, and she seemed to understand that and waited without impatience, without performance, just steady. I don't know yet, he said, but I think I'm the only Vico available, so we're going to have to find out together. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Her face changed just slightly, just enough. Felix, she said, the 2 banks' cars on Meserole are moving. They're heading east, toward Brevonin. He says they turned onto Manhattan Avenue. A pause. Madrian, my grandfather, the place he's staying. It's reachable from Manhattan Avenue if you know the right exit. Does Banks know the right exit? She was already typing to Felix. 3 seconds, 5-8. Then, Felix says there's a 3rd car. He just picked it up. It was parked on Greenpoint Avenue and all night. He missed it earlier because it didn't match the profile. It's a catering van. A catering van. White, commercial plates. It's been there since at least midnight. That's not surveillance, Adrian said. That's extraction. He started the car. They're not going to your grandfather, he said, pulling out of the parking structure fast. They're trying to bring someone to him, someone who can make an introduction. He glanced at her. Charlotte. They're going to use Charlotte. Maeve's head snapped toward him. Charlotte knows nothing, but Banks doesn't need her to know anything. He just needs her to make a phone call to your grandfather's location. A voice her father gave her this morning, maybe a number, a name, and Charlotte, who was hurt enough and angry enough to want to hurt someone back, makes the call, and whoever answers thinks they're speaking to a neutral party, and his phone rang. Charlotte. He put it on speaker. Charlotte? His voice was even, careful. I was going to call you. He lied to me. Her voice was wrecked. She had been crying, and Charlotte Banks did not cry easily, and the sound of it was ugly and real in a way that none of her performances ever were. Adrian, my father lied to me. About everything. About you, about he sat me down this morning at 7 o'clock, and he told me the marriage was never about us. He said it was, he used the word positioning. He sat at the breakfast table, and he used the word positioning to describe my life. Charlotte. He gave me a phone number this morning. He said, call this number. He said, the man who answers is someone I should know about. He said, if I call, I'll understand why last night happened, why the wedding had to happen, why. She stopped. Her voice cracked completely and then reassembled itself. I didn't call it. I almost did, and then I thought, Adrian, who was she? The waitress. Who is she, really? Maeve was looking at the phone. Her face was perfectly still. She's the reason your father arranged our engagement, Adrian said. She's the reason he needed me pointed in the wrong direction for the last 4 years. A long silence. What did she do? Charlotte whispered. She didn't do anything, Charlotte. Her grandfather did, a very long time ago, and your father has been trying to fix it ever since. He kept his voice level, honest. The honesty was tactical, but it was also real, and the combination of the two he found was the only kind that worked. The number he gave you, don't call it. What's on the other end? I don't know exactly, but I know it's not what he told you it was. Another silence, then he's going to cut me out completely, isn't he? If I don't play whatever move he's setting up today, he's going to. Charlotte, listen to me carefully. Do you have a passport? A pause. Yes. Is it at your apartment or at your father's house? My apartment. Adrian, why are you... Go get it right now. Don't call. Your father, don't text anyone. Just go get it and go to Rosa's house in Carroll Gardens. Do you know the address? I've been there twice. Go there. Tell her I sent you. She'll keep you safe until I call. Safe from what, Adrian? Safe from your father's next move, he said, which is going to involve you whether you cooperate or not, and which will go significantly better for you if you are sitting in Rosa Vico's kitchen in Carroll Gardens rather than wherever your father can reach you. He paused. Can you do that? A long moment, the sound of her breathing, the distant sound through the phone of a city going about its morning. Yeah, she said finally, small, stripped of performance. Just yes. Good, go now. He ended the call. Maeve had not moved. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't entirely read. He kept his eyes on the road. You just put her under your protection, she said. Yes. She threw a wine glass at my face. Yes. And you're protecting her. If Banks loses access to Charlotte, he loses his cleanest lever. He'll still have others, but they'll cost him more time and more exposure to use them. We need time. He glanced over. I'm not doing it for Charlotte. I'm doing it because it's the right move. And the right move and the decent thing just happen to coincide. Sometimes they do. She turned back to the window. My grandfather would like you, she said quietly. He used to say that a man who only does the right thing when it's convenient for him isn't a good man. He's just an opportunist with better PR. I'll take that as a compliment. It was. A beat. He also used to say that the most dangerous moment in any plan is not when things go wrong. It's when things go right too fast. When suddenly you have more than you expected sooner than you expected, and you have to decide in real time whether you're ready for it. Are you? I've been ready for 2 years. She looked at the key in her hand. The question is whether we can get to Yonkers before Banks figures out the box exists. Does he know about the box? He knows there must be physical evidence somewhere. He's looked for it for 22 years. He's never found it because the name on the account is the name of a woman who died in 1987 in a car accident in Ohio, and whose identity my grandfather rebuilt entirely from public records. She paused. But if he gets to my grandfather directly, if he gets to him before we do, or if he gets someone inside whatever location he's been using, my grandfather knows about the box. He knows the name. An hour with my grandfather, and Banks has everything. Then we go to your grandfather first. Yes. Tell me where he is, Maeve. She looked at him. The key was in her hand. The photograph was in her bag. 22 years of hiding and waiting and carrying a dead man's name like a stone in her chest. And now she was sitting in an unregistered car with the son of the man who had made the promise. And outside the window, the October sun was finally breaking through the flat gray morning and laying itself across the street in long yellow strips that looked for just a moment like something that might be called good. She told him. He already knew the route. The drive took 41 minutes. Adrian drove the way he thought, without wasted movement, without unnecessary speed, with the particular controlled intensity of a man who understood that arriving alive mattered more than arriving fast. Maeve sat beside him and watched the city give way to the outer boroughs, and then to the kind of neighborhoods where the houses had yards, and the yards had trees, and the trees had lost most of their leaves by now. And she did not speak, and he did not speak, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had said enough for now, and were saving the rest for what came next. Her grandfather was staying in a house in a quiet neighborhood in Yonkers. that belonged to a retired electrician named George Pappas, who had served in the same unit as Cassian Voss in 1968, and who had been keeping one particular secret for his old friend for 11 years without asking a single question about it, because George Pappas was the kind of man who understood that some loyalties do not require explanation. Felix had arranged it. Felix had arranged most things. It turned out the apartment in Greenpoint, the job at Le Corbeau Noir, the references that were too perfect to have come from restaurants. Felix, whose real name Maeve had never learned, and whose face she had seen exactly twice, was apparently a man of considerable organizational talent and very little interest in recognition, which was Maeve had come to understand the rarest and most valuable combination of qualities in the world her grandfather inhabited. She had called ahead on the secondary phone. 3 rings, then a voice she had known since before she could form complete sentences. Maeve, Grandpa, I'm coming. 40 minutes. I'm bringing Adrian Vico. A pause. Then very quietly something that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sigh, but lived in the space between them. Your father was right about you, the old man said. He said you'd know the right moment when it came. I'm not sure I chose the moment. The moment chose me. That's how it always works, sweetheart. Another pause. Is he his father's son? She looked at Adrian. He was watching the road. His jaw was set. His hands were easy on the wheel. I think so, she said. I think he might be better. The pause on the other end was long enough that she almost spoke again. Then bring him. I've been waiting 22 years. I can wait 40 more minutes. She put the phone in her bag. He's expecting us, she told Adrian. I heard. He asked if you were your father's son. I heard that too. I told him you might be better. He did not respond to that for a moment. Then, that's a significant thing to say about a man you've known for less than 24 hours. My grandfather raised me to read people fast. He said slow reading is a luxury for people who have time to be wrong. She paused. I've been reading you for 11 months, Adrian. The 24 hours is just when you found out. He absorbed that. They drove. His phone buzzed at the 40-minute mark. Luca texting this time, not calling, which meant the information was sensitive enough that Luca did not want it spoken aloud. Adrian handed the phone to Maeve without looking away from the road. Read it to me. She read it. He says Senator Banks made 3 phone calls in the last hour. First call 6 minutes to a number registered to a law firm in D.C. that Luca says has done regulatory work for Banks's office for 15 years. Second call 11 minutes to an unlisted number that Luca's tracing now. Third call 4 minutes to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. She stopped. She read the last line again. He says the third call was not to the duty officer. It was to a direct line belonging to a deputy prosecutor named Kevin Marsh, who was appointed to his current position 18 months ago. Luca says Marsh's predecessor was forced to resign under ethics review, and the review was initiated by a complaint filed through Banks's legal pack. Banks owns Marsh, Adrian said. Yes. He's trying to get ahead of the document. If he can get a friendly prosecutor to open a parallel investigation, something that touches the same territory, but that he controls, he can potentially use it to classify or suppress the original evidence before it surfaces. He shook his head. He's moving fast. He's scared. He should be scared. He should be scared, but scared men make fast moves, and fast moves are not always stupid ones. He took a right turn, then another. How far? 3 more minutes. Left at the church, then second right. He made the turns. George Pappas's house was a 2-story colonial on a street where every house looked more or less the same: aluminum siding, chain link fence, a car in the driveway that had not been new in a decade. It was in its very ordinariness the most effective hiding place Maeve had ever seen. Her grandfather had an eye for that. He had always had an eye for that. Adrian parked at the curb. He turned off the engine. Neither of them moved for a moment. Whatever he tells you in there, Maeve said, I need you to understand something first. He is 81 years old. He has been hiding for 22 years. He has spent more of his life protecting that document than he has spent living his own life. He is not just a witness. He is not a resource. He is my grandfather, and he is the reason I know how to stand up in a room full of dangerous men without flinching, and I need you to see him as a person before you see him as a solution. She looked at Adrian directly. Can you do that? Yes, he said. No hesitation. She opened the door. Cassian Voss was sitting in the kitchen when they came through the back door, which George Pappas held open without a word and then quietly disappeared through the other side of the house. He was 81 years old and he looked it. His hair was entirely white. His hands were spotted with age. His shoulders had the particular curve of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. But his eyes, when he looked up from the table, were the same shade of green as his granddaughter's, and they moved with the same careful, calibrated attention, and they found Adrian's face immediately and stayed there. Adrian stopped in the doorway. He had not known what he expected. He had not allowed himself to build an expectation, because expectation was a liability, and he had enough of those already. But the man at the table was in some way that Adrian could not have articulated and did not try to familiar. Not in his face, in his stillness, in the quality of his presence. It was the quality of a man who had spent a long time in rooms where the wrong word cost lives, and who had learned through that long time to make every word count and to waste none. It was the quality Adrian associated in his oldest and deepest memory with his father. He crossed the kitchen. He pulled out the chair across from the old man. He sat down. Cassian Voss looked at him for a very long moment. Then he said in a voice that was slightly hoarse with age but entirely steady, "You have his eyes. Did you know that the exact same eyes, your mother's coloring, but your father's eyes?" "I've been told," Adrian said. "He was the best man I ever knew," Cassian said. "I want you to know that before anything else. Whatever you may have heard about him, whatever his ledger showed, whatever the accounting of his life adds up to, he was the best man I ever knew. He made choices I would not have made. He did things I could not have done. But he also hid me and my family for 22 years at a personal cost that I will not ever be able to repay, and he never once asked me to." He paused. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there when he died." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "He would have understood," he said finally. "Yes, he would have." Cassian looked at his granddaughter, who had sat down beside him, whose hand he reached over and held with both of his spotted, heavy hands. "She did everything right," he said, not to Maeve, but to Adrian. "Everything exactly the way I told her. Down to the restaurant, down to the section she worked, down to the Thursday evenings. I told her Thursdays were your nights. Consistent men are easier to time. A faint trace of something that might have been humor. Your father was the same way, consistent to a fault. We may need to move past the history," Adrian said carefully. "Banks made a call to a deputy prosecutor 40 minutes ago. I don't know exactly what he said, but I know what he's building toward, and I know we have a narrower window than I'd like." Cassian nodded. He was not surprised. He had the look of a man who had spent 22 years expecting exactly this morning and who had made peace with its arrival a long time ago. "The document," Adrian said. "Maeve told me what it contains. I need to know if everything she told me is accurate, and I need to know if there's anything she doesn't know." "Everything she told you is accurate," Cassian said, "and there is one thing she doesn't know." Maeve's head turned. "Grandpa, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I kept this from you because I needed you to come to this moment without the weight of it. If you'd known, it would have changed how you carried everything else." He looked at her steadily. The document, the original file, the prosecutor who kept it, was named Arthur Greer. He kept it as insurance the way I told your father he did. But Arthur Greer died in 2019. Heart attack. Natural causes. He paused. Before he died, he sent a package to a law firm in Philadelphia. In the package was a letter and a single key. The letter said the key belonged to a lockbox that contained an authenticated copy of every document in his original file copies he had made in 2001, copies that he authenticated himself with sworn notarizations, copies that his own attorney witnessed and signed. He paused again. The letter was addressed to Adrian Vico. The kitchen went silent. Adrian did not move. His face showed nothing, but his hands on the table pressed flat, the same gesture Maeve had seen with the wine glass, the same controlled response to an impact that was larger than expected. "Greer sent it to me," he said. "He sent it to the current head of the Vico family. He didn't know you by name, he knew your father, and he knew that whoever came after your father would receive the correspondence." Cassian looked at him. "The law firm has been holding it since 2019. They've been attempting to locate you through intermediary channels because they couldn't approach you directly without exposing what they were carrying." He paused. "Adrian, the firm's name is Callaway and Associates. They're in Philadelphia. They've had this package for 6 years. Adrian pulled out his phone. He typed the name. He looked at the result. He put the phone face down on the table. "I've used that firm," he said quietly, "for a real estate transaction in 2021. They handled the title search." "I know," Cassian said. "I was told." "They had the package. They had it in their files while I was signing documents at their conference table." "Yes." And they said nothing. They were under attorney-client privilege and specific instruction from Greer's estate not to approach you unless you initiated contact with the firm for reasons that allowed them to assess your character directly. Cassian met his eyes. "The real estate transaction apparently was sufficient. They've been waiting for you to come back." Adrian sat with this for exactly 4 seconds. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. "Callaway and Associates, how can I?" "This is Adrian Vico. I need to speak with whoever is managing the Greer estate correspondence. Today, within the hour. Tell them it concerns the package they have been holding since 2019. He paused. "Tell them I know what's in it." A short silence on the other end. "One moment, Mr. Vico." He was on hold for 45 seconds. Then a new voice, older male, careful with the cadence of a man who chose every word with both hands. "Mr. Vico, this is Philip Callaway. I have to say we did not expect your call quite this soon. Events accelerated, so I understand. Mr. Vico, I want to be direct with you. The package contains authenticated copies of 37 documents. Among them are 11 sworn notarizations, 4 of which directly name Senator Harold Banks of New York in connection with payments made to a sitting federal prosecutor between 1998 and 2002. The documents were assessed by 2 independent forensic document examiners in 2020. Both assessments confirmed authenticity." He paused. "We have also in the last 40 minutes received an inquiry from a deputy prosecutor in the Southern District named Kevin Marsh, who has asked whether our firm has any correspondence relating to the late Arthur Greer." "What did you tell him?" "We told him we were not in a position to discuss client matters without a subpoena. And he said he would have one by end of day." Adrian looked at Cassian. Cassian was watching him without expression. Maeve had gone very still beside her grandfather. "Mr. Callaway," Adrian said, "I need you to do something, and I need you to do it in the next 30 minutes. I need you to contact the FBI field office in New York. Not the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI directly, and I need you to formally notify them that you are in possession of evidence relating to federal corruption in the Southern District, and that you have reason to believe a deputy prosecutor in that same district has been informed of this evidence and may be in a position to suppress it." A longer pause. "Mr. Vico, that is a significant—" "I know what it is. I also know that Arthur Greer addressed that package to my family because he trusted us to use it correctly when the moment came. The moment has come, Mr. Callaway. My family honors its obligations." Another pause. Shorter. "I'll make the call," Callaway said. He ended the call. The kitchen was quiet. From somewhere else in the house, George Pappas was watching television, the sound of a morning news program, distant, inordinary, leaking through the walls. "Banks is going to know within the hour," Maeve said. "When Marsh tells him about Callaway's call to the FBI." "Yes." Adrian was already texting Luca. "Which means we have approximately 50 minutes before Banks shifts from suppression mode into something more direct." He looked at Cassian. "Is there anywhere else you can go? Somewhere that Felix doesn't know about, that Banks has never had a lead on?" Cassian smiled. It was a slow smile, the smile of an old man who had spent decades thinking several moves ahead, and who had found in this particular morning in the rare satisfaction of watching a game he had set in motion finally play out the way he had always believed it would. "George has a brother-in-law in Connecticut," he said. "I've never used the connection. Felix doesn't know about it. Banks certainly doesn't." He looked at Maeve. "I'll call George." "I'll take you there myself," Maeve said. "No," Adrian said it firmly, and they both looked at him, and he met their looks without apology. "Maeve stays with me. Banks doesn't know exactly what she has or what she knows, but if she disappears into Connecticut with you, he'll assume the worst and accelerate. I need him watching her and watching me. I need his attention on the front of the board." "While you move from behind," Cassian said. "While the FBI moves from behind," Adrian said. "I am not the weapon here. I never was. I'm what my father always was." He paused, and something moved across his face that was not grief exactly, but lived close to it. I'm the man who stands next to the person who actually has the power. Cassian looked at him for a long time. No, he said very quietly. Your father always said that about himself, and he was wrong then too. He leaned forward slightly. A man who uses his position, his name, his entire network to protect something true, that man is not standing next to power. He is the power. He put a hand on the table between them, old spotted slightly unsteady, but placed with deliberate intention. Your father made me a promise. You honored it this morning before you even knew what you were honoring. That matters, Adrian. That is not a small thing. Adrian looked at the old man's hand on the table. He put his own hand over it. Neither of them spoke. Maeve watched them and felt for the first time in 2 years something loosen in her chest. Not relief exactly. The day was far from over, and Banks was far from finished, and the next several hours were going to require everything she had. But something, the particular loosening that comes when a thing you have been holding for a very long time is finally shared, finally distributed across more than one set of hands, finally no longer entirely yours to carry alone. Her phone buzzed. Felix. She read the message. The white van on Greenpoint Avenue is moving, she said. Felix says it's heading toward the Manhattan Bridge. Toward the city, Adrian said. He was already standing. Banks is pulling back. He doesn't know exactly what happened in the last 40 minutes, but he knows something shifted. He looked at Maeve. He's regrouping, which means we have a window, a short one. She stood. She looked at her grandfather. He had released Adrian's hand and he was sitting back in his chair with the look of a man who has run a very long race and has crossed the finish line in a position he considers acceptable. Not triumphant, not relieved, simply done in the way that a man is done when he has finally put down something heavy after carrying it so long that the weight had become in some strange way a comfort. Go, he said, both of you. Go do what needs to be done. I'll call you, Maeve said. I know you will. He reached up and put his hand on her face briefly, gently, the way grandfathers do. You were better than I deserve, sweetheart. Better than I hoped for. Your father would have... He stopped. His voice had done something it had not done through any of the rest of it. He controlled it. Your father would have been very proud. She pressed her hand over his for 1 second. Then she picked up her bag and she walked to the door and Adrian followed her. And behind them, George Pappas came quietly back into the kitchen to sit with his old friend. And outside, the morning had gone fully bright and cold and clear. Adrian's phone rang as they reached the car. Not Luca this time. A number he did not recognize with a 212 area code. He answered it. Mr. Vico, a woman's voice. Professional. Measured. My name is Special Agent Diana Rice, FBI Field Office, New York. I've just received a referral from a law firm in Philadelphia regarding certain documents. I'm told you may be in a position to assist with context. I am buying him, Adrian said. Are you available to meet today? Tell me when and where. 1 hour, Federal Plaza. I'll be there. He ended the call. He looked at Maeve across the roof of the car. FBI, she said. It was not a question. 1 hour, Federal Plaza. She nodded slowly. It's moving fast. It needed to move fast. Banks has too many resources to give him time. He paused. Are you ready for this? Because once we walk into that building, the thing that has been private becomes public. Your grandfather's name, your name, all of it. My grandfather has been hiding for 22 years, she said. He is 81 years old. He has had no life, Adrian. No real life. His daughter, my mother, died without being able to grieve openly, without being able to bury herself in a real community, without being able to use her real name at her own funeral. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness cost something. I did not come to New York to keep hiding. I came to end it, whatever it costs. He held her gaze. Then we end it, he said. They got in the car. Luca called at the 40-minute mark as they were crossing into Lower Manhattan with the news that Senator Harold Banks had canceled 3 scheduled appearances and that his office was not answering press calls, and that 2 of his personal attorneys had been seen entering his Upper East Side townhouse in the last 30 minutes. Charlotte Luca confirmed had arrived safely at Rosa's brownstone in Carroll Gardens. Rosa had made her tea and had not apparently said a single word about the previous evening, which Luca reported with an admiration he did not bother to conceal. At the 50-minute mark, Kevin Marsh submitted his resignation from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Adrian found out because Charlotte texted him. She had seen it on the news, she said, and she had understood without being told what it meant, and she had sent him 3 words. You were right. He did not reply. There would be time for that later. At Federal Plaza, Special Agent Rice was exactly as her voice suggested. Professional, measured, unhurried, in the way of people whose work had taught them that patience was not the opposite of urgency, but its most effective expression. She had 2 colleagues with her. She had a conference room. She had already released on the table a preliminary brief from Callaway and Associates that she had clearly read very recently and very carefully. She looked at Adrian when he sat down. She looked at Maeve. She looked at the key Maeve placed on the table between them. The safe deposit box in Yonkers, Rice said. Yes, Maeve said. There are physical pages from the original document. There are authenticated digital copies on a USB drive. And there is a sworn statement from Cassian Voss, a notarized witness, recounting his direct knowledge of each transaction. She paused. He wrote the statement in 2018. He has been willing to testify in person for the last 4 years. He has simply been waiting for circumstances that would allow his testimony to be given safely. Reese looked at her for a long moment. Ms. Voss, she said, how long have you been carrying this? Maeve thought about the question. She thought about a fire escape in Providence, and a kitchen table, and a locked drawer, and a cracked wine glass, and a photograph of 2 men laughing in the New Jersey sun in the last good summer. My whole life, she said, one way or another. Rice nodded once. She did not offer sympathy, which Maeve appreciated, because sympathy was not what was needed, and Rice was perceptive enough to know it. What was needed was what Rice was already doing, opening a folder, uncapping a pen, looking across the table with the expression of a woman who intends to do her job correctly and completely. Then let's begin, Rice said. They began. 3 hours later, Harold Banks was escorted from his Upper East Side townhouse by 2 agents who had arrived with a document that was not quite an arrest warrant, but was close enough that the distinction ceased to matter by the time his attorneys finished reading it. He said nothing when he was escorted out. He was a man who had spent 40 years managing his public face, and the face he wore in that moment was composed and empty and told nothing to anyone except that it told everything, because a man who has nothing to hide does not have that face. Only a man who has spent a very long time building walls wears that face at the moment the walls come down. Charlotte saw it on the news from Rosa's living room. She sat in an armchair that smelled of old fabric and tomatoes and something she could not identify, but which was, she realized slowly, the smell of a house that had been lived in fully and honestly for a very long time. She sat and she watched the screen, and she felt nothing she had a word for. Not grief, not relief, not triumph. Something quieter and stranger and more permanent than any of those, something that was perhaps the beginning of understanding how much of her life had been built on foundations she had not known were there and had not known were rotten, and how extraordinary and terrifying it was to find yourself at 26 years old standing on ground that was finally for the first time real. Rosa brought her more tea. Drink, she said, and then eat something, and then tomorrow you will decide what to do next. She sat down across from her. Tonight you just sit. Charlotte looked at her. Why are you being kind to me, she said, after everything? Because you did the right thing, Rosa said simply. When it mattered, you called Adrian instead of your father. That is not a small thing, she paused. And because, she added with a look that was pure and dry and entirely without sentiment, your father was going to use you and discard you, and no woman deserves that. Not even a woman who throws wine glasses in restaurants. Charlotte looked at her hands. I'll call Maeve, she said, to apologize, when she's ready to hear it. Good, Rosa said. That is the correct instinct. Outside the brownstone in Carroll Gardens, the October afternoon was going gold at the edges, the kind of light that made even the hardest city look like it was trying. In a coffee shop on the other side of the river, Maeve sat across from Adrian, with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that was actually hot this time, and neither of them spoke for a moment because everything that had needed to be said had been said in a conference room at Federal Plaza, and what remained between them now was not information but something slower and less defined that neither of them was in a hurry to name. What happens now? She said finally. He considered the question with the same seriousness he gave everything. Now your grandfather comes out, legally, safely, with protection and context, in the full weight of whatever the FBI chooses to do with what you've given them. Now the document surfaces in an environment controlled enough that banks cannot suppress it. Now the story becomes something that can be told publicly, which means your family's name becomes something that can be said out loud again. He paused. For the first time in 22 years, she absorbed that. And you, she said. I have a wedding to unplan, he said, and a great many Thursdays presumably with an open table. She looked at him. The corner of her mouth moved. I know a very good waitress, she said, if you're looking. Is she available? As of last night, yes. Does she have a last name? Voss, she said. Her name is Maeve Voss. He picked up his coffee. He looked at her across the table with his father's eyes and his own steady, careful expression. And then for the second time in 2 days, Adrian Vico smiled. Not the brief, private, controlled thing from the night before, but a full and unguarded smile, the kind that arrived without permission and stayed without being asked, the kind that a man produces when something he had stopped expecting a long time ago walks in through a restaurant door and refuses, despite every instruction to the contrary, to kneel. Maeve Voss, he said, it's good to finally know your name. And just like that, after 22 years of hiding and 11 months of waiting, and one Thursday evening that had changed everything, the Voss family came home, and the promise Adrian Vico's father had made in the last good summer of 1987 was finally completely and irrevocably kept.